Hello, this is Max. The boy, motherless, discovered an extraordinary gift by accident, which caused the death of his father and his grandmother. Don't forget to subscribe. The film opens with a young boy named Charlie Furlong playing hide and seek with his friends. While hiding in a cabinet, he inadvertently witnesses his father being in an affair with another woman, which frightens him so deeply that he temporarily loses his sight. From that moment on, Charlie experiences temporary blindness for 37 minutes whenever he thinks about an affair, including on his honeymoon, leaving his wife bewildered. Years later, we learn that Charlie's son, Philip, has inherited a peculiar curse. Whenever he becomes scared or anxious, nearby electrical devices malfunction. 2 decades later, during Philip's wife's labor, she becomes overwhelmed with panic and collapses. Interestingly, when her pregnant belly makes contact with the ground, all the surrounding vegetation begins to wither. In the next scene, Philip arrives and drives his wife to the hospital. However, he becomes so terrified that the car breaks down. Faced with no other option, he ends up delivering the baby himself. Drawing on his experience from working on a cow farm, Philip manages to safely deliver his son, but sadly, his wife does not survive. She passes away from extreme exhaustion. Fast forward 10 years, and we find James Furlong, the boy, living in the countryside with his father and grandmother. His grandfather, Charlie, died in an accident after suddenly going blind upon glimpsing hot poster, which rendered him sightless. Understanding that the Furlong family is cursed, James's caring grandmother constantly advises him to lead a normal life and avoid trouble. However, he disregards her warnings and does the exact opposite. James is eager to discover his supernatural abilities, so he often engages in reckless stunts. One day, dressed as Superman, he rides his bicycle at full speed, hoping to test if he can fly. Unfortunately, he crashes and gets hurt. Later, Philip, his father, visits the farm and finds that all their cows have mysteriously died. This is the same area where James had his accident. In his anger, Philip returns home and begins to berate his son. When James, terrified, hides inside the car, Philip drags him out and slaps him, causing him to fall to the ground. As this happens, the vegetation around James starts to wither. Before Philip can grasp what's occurring, he suffers intense pain and dies. Tragically, the grandmother also meets a gruesome end inside the house. In the aftermath, James is sent to an orphanage. Having been pampered and homeschooled all his life, he quickly becomes a target for bullying by the other children. Only one boy, Liam, shows him kindness, and they quickly form a friendship. One day, while James is getting ready to take a shower, the bullies strike again, throwing his soap out the window and forcing him to climb down and retrieve it. As James is climbing, a dog approaches and growls at him, causing him to panic and run away, screaming in fear. The next morning, the principal of the orphanage gathers all the students to deliver shocking news. Her beloved dog has mysteriously died overnight. Furious, she blames the bullies, as they are known for causing trouble. As a result, the bullies, now infuriated, target James and begin to beat him up, with one of them even striking him with a baseball bat. Despite Liam's attempts to intervene, he is unable to stop them. Just when it seems James might be killed, his superpowers manifest. The boys surrounding him, including Liam, suddenly start writhing in agony. One by one, the bullies collapse and die from their agony. Horrified by the carnage, James quickly escapes from the scene. Liam, the only one to survive, managed to flee just in time but is left with severely damaged lungs. Years later, we see a girl named May in a hospital, terminally ill. The doctors have informed her that she doesn't have long to live. Not wanting to spend her remaining time in the hospital, May applies some makeup and sneaks out. Outside, she encounters Liam, who is also receiving treatment at the hospital. It turns out his damaged lungs never fully healed and have developed into cancer. Liam attempts to strike up a conversation with May, but she disregards him and runs into the nearby woods. After several hours of walking, she arrives at a desolate area where all the greenery and wildlife have vanished. As it begins to rain, May takes refuge in a nearby cabin. When she knocks on the door, it is answered by none other than James. Since the orphanage incident, James has isolated himself, afraid of harming others with his powers. He initially refuses to let May in and slams the door in her face. However, when May pleads to be let inside because of the rain, he reluctantly agrees. That night, James allows May to stay in his cabin. This is the first time in years that James interacts with another person. The next morning, they have a brief conversation. Noticing James's nervousness, May offers him her Walkman. As James listens to the music through the headphones, he is overwhelmed with emotion, having been surrounded by nothing but forest sounds for so long. Grateful, James cooks a meal for May, which he finds delicious. Later, May decides to swim at a nearby lake. James brings her a towel but feels embarrassed when he sees her in a state of undress. Afterward, they have another conversation where May reveals her illness. James, having been cut off from the outside world for so long, is unfamiliar with what cancer is. Despite his lack of knowledge about cancer, James sincerely hopes for May's speedy recovery. They spend a few hours together, gazing at the beautiful sky. When May decides it's time to return to the hospital, she bids James farewell and leaves. Shortly after, James realizes she has forgotten her Walkman. He rushes to return it but, in his haste, slips and tumbles down a hill. When May hears her mother calling from a distance, she quickly hides inside a dead tree with James. Although James urges May to go back to her mother and continue her treatment, May refuses to leave him alone, especially since he's injured. It's clear that both have developed strong feelings for each other. That night, back at the cabin, May tries to tend to James's wounds, but he keeps pushing her away. When May asks what's wrong, James opens up about his past. He recounts the traumatic events where he accidentally caused the deaths of his family, an innocent dog, and several boys at the orphanage. James explains that after escaping the orphanage as a child, he was too young and unprepared to care for himself properly. James recounts how, after escaping the orphanage, he once ate a wild berry in the woods and fell. A hunter found him just before he could starve and brought him to the cabin, caring for him as if he were his own son. Despite James's repeated warnings to stay away, the hunter continued to look after him. Tragically, one day, James discovered the hunter's lifeless body outside the cabin, a loss that drove him to isolate himself from the world. Touched by James's story and understanding that he is a victim of his own powers, May shows sympathy. They spend a cold night together, with James offering his jacket to May. In the morning, James wakes to find that May has left. When James exits the cabin, he is surprised to find living plants and birds around, a stark contrast to the desolation he had come to expect. Meanwhile, May returns to the hospital and fabricates a story about getting lost while seeking fresh air. Liam eventually discovers the truth when he sees James's red jacket. He warns May that James is dangerous, but she refuses to heed his advice. Furious, Liam goes outside and tries to alert the police. When they dismiss his concerns, Liam throws such a severe tantrum that he has to be sedated. A few days later, James sneaks into the hospital, searching for May. During his search, he encounters Liam, who is too weak to move. Shortly after, James reaches May's room and they spend the night together. The next morning, a miraculous event occurs. All the sick and diseased patients in the hospital begin to heal. The blind regain their sight, the disabled start walking, and cancer patients are no longer at risk. Even Liam's lung infection is miraculously cured. Seizing the opportunity, Liam grabs a pair of scissors and starts searching for James, intent on revenge. Meanwhile, as the hospital patients fill the hallways, May dresses James in a hospital gown, and they try to blend in with the crowd. Unfortunately, they become separated along the way. At this moment, Liam finally spots James and confronts him, blaming him for the past events. In a fit of rage, Liam chases James outside the hospital, leading to a violent struggle. During the fight, James is stabbed in the stomach. As he begins to bleed, everything around him starts to wither and die. This scene reveals that James's powers are influenced by his emotional state. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Liam flees in panic. May arrives at the scene, and seeing James's distress, she jumps into the river after him since he doesn't know how to swim. May holds James underwater and kisses him passionately. However, James is already dead by this point. As he drowns in the river, the surrounding greenery starts to revive. His death marks the end of the mysterious Furlong family. 5 years later, the scene shifts to May, now reciting a story to a little girl. The girl is revealed to be May and James's daughter. If you are interested in such films, please proceed to the next video on the screen and also share your thoughts about this film in the comments. Give us a like and subscribe. Goodbye.